make to them. As the federal government has these issues and these cuts, then why don't we start looking at some of these mandates that they've imposed on us and give us some flexibility, give us some relief, give us some time to work on all these mandates or these edicts that have been imposed on us, so we don't go bankrupt trying to fulfill all these mandates. Once you loosen up some of the strings that you've, not of the strings, the shackles that you provided this government, we have 20 million people in Shanghai, 20 million people in Beijing. They allow for visa waivers for Americans to go to their cities. Now, that's a communist nation, and yet we have all these restrictions and these visa requirements for their citizens to come to the United States. Aren't we the free country? So I'm hopeful that in these times when the federal government is cutting back and trying to get their act together, then allow our territory the flexibility to deal with some of these issues, these imposed mandates, give us some flexibility, and then unloosen those shackles and allow us to reach our full potential, such in areas such as the China visa waiver. So I'm going to push hard, aside from stabilizing our critical services, but push hard for economic development, so we can grow our general fund through our local general fund, and then also push hard for flexibility. So allowing that if they're going to make these cuts, give us some flexibility on how that spending or that we do get can be utilized with the decisions being made here in Agatna rather than in Washington, D.C.
And speaking of the visa waiver, I guess what are some of the updates or what that you received in visiting Washington?
And talk about luck. I don't call it luck. I call it, sometimes the right things work out. At the dinner at the White House, I was sitting next to Janet Napolitano. So I bent her ear at that dinner. We had already had a scheduled meeting the next day for the Homeland Security officials. So she got her top aide, a guy named Phil McNamara, to sit in at that meeting. And after I gave him the whole rundown, and of course he did a little bit of the history, how long this has taken, we feel very confident that from what we've heard from again, this senior aide of Ms. Napolitano, that there will be a conclusion. And he is recommending to the Secretary that resolution will happen either late March or April of this year. So it's going to happen. Now, let's see what the resolution will be. One way or the other, we're going to get an answer.
And this was, you met with Janet Napolitano herself? Or?
We were having dinner with each other.
Do you have a picture?
It was a dinner with Janet Napolitano, actually,
that would be great
at the White House. No, I was having dinner with my son. If my wife had come, she would have brought the camera, but me and my son. So, talk about the people we were sitting with in the table. So I had a couple of governors with me in the table, but we were also sitting with, this was Janet Napolitano, and I had a chance to talk to her about these issues, and we had that follow-up meeting the next day. Sat down with the interim EPA administrator also, and I advised him, I said, we've agreed to this consent decree that we're floating out to hundreds of millions of dollars, and we're supposed to abide by 2018, and then, Mr. Secretary, then you now throw this disavowal of the waivers for secondary wastewater treatment that will cost us another $400 million. One thing is evident. How the heck are we going to keep to the terms of the original consent decree? And I advised him of that situation. So we had a follow-up meeting also with other EPA folks. In fact, I've had two meetings with the EPA administrator. One of them was with the Western Governors Conference, that meeting, and one of them was, of course, at dinner at the White House. And then, of course, there was a third meeting with some of his staffers getting into the details of this. So I'm going to follow up with Mr. Sanchez at CCU to see how now we can get EPA to understand that, hey, you can't squeeze blood from a rock. And we're going to have to look towards finding ways for flexibility with all these unfunded mandates. The other fellow I was sitting right next to, too, was Secretary Shinseki with Veterans Affairs. And I brought up the issue with him in regards to some of the shortfalls that we have in regards to mental health in Guam, particularly those issues with the veterans. And I asked him to be an advocate and a backer for us, because we do have $8 million that is currently in the Senate appropriation, the bill, appropriations bill for the defense, that has been tied up by Senator McCain. And I advised the Secretary, Mr. Secretary, there is money already there that is ready to be spent for Guam, in particular the issues of mental health, and whether it's for veterans or for all our consumers. I need your help on that. So we've got an ear on that as well, and we believe we're putting all the right pressure. We believe in our discussions with Senator Inhofe, and his people seem to be much more, how would you say, flexible and open and understanding to allowing us to spend this money outside the gate.
Can you talk about your meeting with Ashton and Carter, and what can you tell us about?
Well, of course, there was the bad news, and he advised us issues on the sequestration, and we see it now unfolding. But the good news is, and this was very clear by the Deputy Secretary, is that these are issues in the sequestration that are serious, and they must be dealt with. But it does not change their geopolitical strategies. It does not change the treaty that has been signed with Japan. It does not change the scenario that will occur in regards to the importance of the Asia-Pacific region. So the plan, we got those assurances that this realignment, the buildup will occur. The timetables may change as a result of sequestration, but the plan of action will not.
And can you give us an idea of how it may change? Will it?
Obviously, the
less
record of
funding,
decision, we're looking at 2015.
Mhm.
I would love to get some of the money that has already been appropriated to be spent, and that's where we're putting that pressure on. But then after 2015, the continued appropriations that will occur and how they will be spent and under what terms and under what length of time, that remains to be seen. So we'll find that out as the Congress and the administration deal with the issues of their budget shortfalls. But I did remind every one of these folks, this is not American money. The government of Japan has spent $800 million out of their taxpayers, transferred it over to the Treasury Department, to Treasury. So now it is in the hands of the U.S. government. Let's spend that $800 million bucks, spend it here on Guam. Won't cost the American taxpayers anything, and it'll help our economy.
Ken and Janelle,
Any other questions?
we wrap this up?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Anything?
Is there anything else? Or-
No.
Anything?
Are you going to send out a press release with detailing all the officials that the governor met with?
We could.
Or
Yeah.
it doesn't have
I
to be.
can get that. I can get it. In fact, Ariola, because some of the